Hey everybody, welcome back to A Brief on Grief. I have a very special session coming right now with a very special guest. This is Jim. Everybody, Jim, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi.
So Jim Molloy, me and Jim met last year in an online course that we took, and we were in breakout rooms together, and we just ended up chatting a little bit in there and ended up chatting afterwards on and off. And one day I asked him if I felt inspired to ask him if he wanted to come and join me on A Brief on Grief to chat about his experience with being a caregiver and kind of being with his wife during her experience of a long-term illness and death, and just to talk about his experience and his personal story through that journey. So again, I love talking about grief. I love sharing space with people. So my intention for this was to have Jim on and basically share his story, share his experience with loss, the multifaceted parts of grief and loss. If you guys another thing is it's powerful when people share their personal stories. It does a lot of things. It helps the person heal their heart a little bit more. It inspires and helps other people also heal their hearts, the people that are listening. So it's super powerful. It's knowing about loss and grief has transformed my life. And it's basically like one of those things I didn't know that I didn't know. But now that I know more about loss and grief, it's lit a fire in me of passion and inspiration, hence this series and why I'm here with Jim today. So how are you feeling today, Jim?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Yeah. So maybe before we jump in a little bit more, because I want to explain or talk to the audience a little bit more about what grief and loss is, just for some people that are maybe unfamiliar. But before we do that, let's share. Do you want to share with the audience kind of your intentions for being here today?
Okay, yeah, my intention is to help people who might be going through it. I encountered so much more than I was ever taught about grief. It's like an incredible bronco ride of emotions. And not all of them feel like what you should be feeling, And so then there's guilt and shame around that, and which just increases the suffering. You've already got enough suffering with the grief. Now, when you start beating yourself up because you're not feeling the right feelings, it's really hard. So I want to share my experience to let people know that whatever it is they're feeling, it's fine, and sort of give some examples. And give some examples also. It's full of potholes. It's just like, if you hit a big pothole and stay in it, your life could be headed down the wrong path. So it's important to realize the potholes also. So, and I think I've seen them all.
You've seen the potholes and lived through them or jumped over them?
Bounced through them. But came out of them, so.
Yeah, I like the image of bouncing. I just saw you on a pogo stick. Those pogo sticks from the days. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are beautiful intentions, Jim. And I love how you already introduced the idea that grief, we were all taught in this society and by our families for generations and generations, that grief is basically just sadness, right? But like Jim just expressed, it's much more than sadness. And loss, mostly when we think of loss, we think, oh, the death of somebody we love or the end of a relationship, but loss is way more than that. They actually say that there's over 40 different kinds of losses, and that we experience loss like nearly every single day as human beings. And when I say a loss, I think of an emotional loss, right? So I just want to maybe just define like loss and grief a little bit more for people before we jump into Jim's sharing. They say, so a loss is basically like the end or a change in any familiar pattern or behavior in your life, right? So of course, like a death of somebody you care about is a loss, the end of a relationship. But if you move and change cities, that's a loss. If you change jobs, that's a loss. everything that's going on in our world with COVID right now and how it's shaken up our routines, that is just a massive global loss, like a global grieving process. Even happy moments that you would think like a marriage or like the birth of a first baby, those are also losses because it is a big change from the previous life you had before to after. So, and that kind of highlights what grief actually is, because grief is not just sadness. Grief is kind of like an umbrella term. It's like a state kind of, and there's a complex emotions underneath. So like the definition of grief, it's kind of like complex, complicated emotions that result from a change or an end of anything in your life, right? So there's grief involved in every kind of loss in your life. So anytime you lose something, or anytime something ends, or anytime something changes, you experience loss. So there's things like loss of connection. I think that's one of the daily losses that we feel as humans. The Gottmans, like the relationship gurus that have studied like relationships and love for like past 40 years, talk about failed bids of connection and how that's like the most popular like loss, and how that can be a repetitive loss of a bit of connection with somebody you love slowly degrades a relationship. So, and then there's losses of trust, right? Like if something's happening, or loss of safety, if something's happening, you're in an abusive situation, or you're just perceiving a loss of safety, that can cause grief too. So again, grief can be felt as anger, basically think of any uncomfortable emotion that you feel. So anger, fear, shame, guilt, anxiety, overwhelm, frustration, like endless, anything, jealousy, envy, that can all be involved in that umbrella term of grief. So learning this, it was just I took a specific grief recovery program where I learned this, and the first couple sessions were they blew me away, because learning what loss and grief actually is, it was that step back to be like, so I could see it in myself, and it was like I could nurture myself and love myself through the process instead of judging myself, adding that shame component. And like Jim highlighted beautifully, there's already so many emotions involved in grief in your experience. But if you go and add like anger and judgment and shame on yourself, it just increases the suffering. So it's a huge topic. It's inspired great passion and stuff in me, which is why we're here. So I'm trying to think, there was another part. Another key thing about grief and loss is to know that we, as a society, we've learned unhealthy ways of dealing with grief. And we've been they kind of in six basic topics they call it the grief myths, or the myths of healing grief. So we're told, I don't know if I'll remember all 6 here, but we're told basically to suck it up, not feel bad, or don't feel bad too long. Don't burden other people with your pain. Stay strong and take care of others first before yourself. Replace the loss. That's a very popular one. I can't remember all the other ones, but that basically covers almost all of them. So if I know that as I said those, that resonates with a lot of the messages that we would have heard, right? So think of a specific thing, like if you broke up with a boyfriend or a spouse or whatever, and somebody says to you, oh, don't feel, you'll be okay, in a few weeks or a few months, there's lots of fish in the sea. So just those kind of casual comments about replacing losses and saying that you shouldn't or you won't feel bad for long. Again, grief is so individual. So everybody does their own journey through it, and there's no set timelines and there's no set stages, even though we've understood from some of the work that's done, or that was done by Kubler-Ross in 1969, I believe. She was actually talking about the grief that people go through and the stages that people go through when they're actually dying themselves. It's a very different situation when people are grieving emotional loss that can happen kind of every single day. So I could talk forever and ever about this topic, but the main reason and the main passion for why I'm here is that I want to hear more from Jim, and I want Jim to be able to share kind of his experience through this very important stage and journey of his life, and how it's kind of shifted things for him into a new perspective. And yeah. Okay, Jim, take it away.
Hey, thank you. You really hit that list of emotions was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on and on and on, right? You basically,
Yeah.
anything, oh, regret and resentment. Those are the big, one of the big ones too. So I know you might speak to some of that. So I will close my mouth and let you share.
Okay. I guess I want to start. I realized the grief actually started. I wish I could turn off the notifications on my computer.
I don't hear anything beeping or anything. So
okay. The grief actually starts before the death. Dery was in a long-term illness. She was bedridden for almost 2 years. And so the first thing you lose is your lifestyle. I mean, before the illness, you would get out, you'd do things, you'd have your life. And then everything becomes focused around the illness when someone becomes bedridden. I was lucky I was able to afford live-in home care. So that relieved me of the day-to-day changing the bed and all of that, but you still have to manage the household and you still basically lose your lifestyle. Whatever you guys shared before is now, it's all just focused on the care. And then you might have, as the illness progresses, you might have personality changes, either due to dementia, or some diseases put people into dementia, and also medicines. We had Dery was a very sweet person, very respectful to the help. And there was a point after she got out of the hospital where she just became vicious. We were scratching our heads. We're just like, what's going on? Well, the hospital had put her on 3 Tilex 750s a day for pain. And she just continued that when she came home. And fortunately, a chiropractic friend of ours sent us a notification that heavy Tilex use can cause personality changes. And that's what it was. And she wanted her Tilex. And fortunately, we found out magnesium pills are almost exactly the same as Tilex. So we started substituting magnesium supplements for the Tilex, and we got her off the Tilex, and her mood went back to her normal sweet self. So I think it's important to know if you get personality changes, it's not take it personally, and no, it's really not the person. It's either biological changes or medicine, and you should be aware of medicines.
That's so key, Jim. I love that you highlighted that in more like detail. Yeah, that's so key with, of course, because there's so many medications involved in a situation like that. So
yeah, it's worth doing your homework. I was so thankful that the woman that chiropractor sent us that information, because it was getting pretty difficult, and it all changed when we got her off the Tilex. The other thing is you'll start to have financial pressures, if you're dealing with an illness, and that can really weigh on you. And then ultimately, towards the end, you have to decide when to switch to when to stop trying to cure the disease and switch to palliative care. And that's a huge decision. I just had to do it for one of my dogs, and it's hard to do it for a dog. And so imagine doing it for your spouse. I had it. No doctors will recommend it because they can't recommend it. But I just checked with several sources and does this seem like a sound decision to you? And they'll nod their head. And it's when I had enough agreement, that's when I made the decision.
Yeah, they don't want to tell you when. They kind of want to let you decide when it feels right for you. Yeah, but that's so hard. I can imagine that. I'm not there at all. So
yeah. After the death, of course, the biggest thing is the loss of companionship. And Dery was part of my life for 18 years. In fact, a big part. We were sort of hermits. We didn't have a big social life, so we were really dependent on each other, and daily companionship was really important and really missed. And that it took me by surprise how hard that hit me, because neither one of us got married until we were 52. So I thought I knew how to do single life. I'd done it before, But then after 18 years of companionship, it was just huge. The hole it left in my life was just huge. Uh, and you go through the usual stuff that people think of grief. You pass by the Indian restaurant and you think how the two of you used to enjoy dinners there, or I was sitting at a mall near the hospital, near the Chinese restaurant where I used to get takeout and bring her to her in the hospital, so she'd have a change of the diet. And you just sit there and all of a sudden you break out in tears. And then it passes. But I found myself really desperate to fill that hole. And I think when people experience a loss like that, I think there's probably two ways to handle it. Some people shut down and just figure they're never going to have anything again, and they just sort of go into a big depression. Other people, what I did was became desperate to fill that hole. And fortunately, I had a good grief counselor that kept saying, don't make any major decisions for a year.
Yeah.
No romantic involvements, no financial decisions, don't even move. Don't do anything for a year because your mind is not right. And of course, I'm a stubborn person, and I think in the first 6 months I had two huge infatuations that I was just obsessed with. I felt enormous.
A rule breaker. You're a rule breaker, Jim.
Yeah. I felt enormous guilt because I thought I'm supposed to be grieving, but there was the desperation to fill that hole. Fortunately, neither one of them worked out. And in retrospect, I see how they were absolutely the wrong people. So I was lucky. So all I can do is encourage other people, listen to your grief counselor. Don't make any major decisions for a year.
Yeah, and spend some time reaching out and finding like a counselor that specializes in grief, because I think that's the kicker. Like that's what we have in common here. Like I found a special program for like grief recovery and healing, and it sounds like you had one.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Because I don't think your average therapist is trained in it. My therapist worked with hospice for a long time, and so she was very aware of all the nuances. So
that's key.
People shouldn't be afraid to reach out to a good counselor when they grief. So unwise dating decisions is one possible consequence of one of the potholes.
One of the pothole, the dating pothole.
Yeah. The other possibility is addictions. People fall into addictions, whether that's sex, drugs, binge TV, whatever your addiction is. It might be a mild addiction, but in grief, you're trying to fill that space. You're trying to feel the dopamine again. Yeah. You can start binging. I think I have some YouTube channels I watch, and I think I watch a little too much of them still today.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just kind of fill the empty space in the evenings.
Yeah.
I could be doing something a little more, and not that they're bad in themselves, but when if I spend 4 hours on it, it's like too much.
Yeah, and it's all about like that balance, right? But it's hard. That's so subjective, right? So, and I love you just brought up the grief myth that I forgot in that list before. So it's the distract yourself, right? Everybody's like, go find a project, go distract yourself, you'll feel better. So that's where our numbing addictions come from, right? So TV, food, Netflix, sex, work, exercise, like endless. So anything that we do in an addictive pattern to get that serotonin, right? That pleasure feeling to kind of numb the pain, right? But
And it's tricky because a lot of that stuff in small measures is actually healthy,
exactly.
But when you overdo it just to keep the pain away, yeah, it's not very healthy.
Yeah. And again, you like highlighted another like awesome part is that when you're grieving, you have to be able to allow yourself the joy and the happiness, right? Without the guilt.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people struggle with like learning from maybe their family or from society that, well, because they had this huge loss, they should be feeling this grief and this sadness and this despair for so long or for forever, right? And they feel guilty about finding joy and happiness.
Wearing their black clothes for a year.
Yeah, right. Like those strict rules on what you should. So there's that word should, right? That SH word. And that's always key for shame. Anytime we learn something that we should do, like the myths tell us, right? We should be strong. We should distract ourselves. We should just not burden people with our family or burden people with our feelings. That's all crap because it doesn't make us feel better. And then when it doesn't make us feel better, we think something's wrong with us, right? And so then that creates shame. We think, well, there must be something wrong with me, or I must be weak that I can't feel better by these ways that other people tell me that I should feel better by. So that's a whole other topic of the role that shame plays in all this. That would be a whole other interview, Jim. But yeah, so continue. I wanted to jump in and point.
Okay. This next stuff is what was really difficult for me is the conflicting emotions. Dery and I had a big unresolved issue in our marriage. We worked on, we just were never able to resolve it. And I felt after my initial couple of days of grief, what you call normal grief that like people expect, I found myself angry and about this unresolved issue. And I found myself arguing with her and making excuses and going back and forth. And if that wasn't bad enough, I mean, dealing with that, it was like, oh my God, what's the matter with me? She just died. I've lost her. And here I am angry. It's like, you're not supposed to feel that way. That's the incredible guilt and shame. And again, my grief counselor says, whatever you feel, that's grief and it's okay. But it's hard to get down on yourself for not having what you think should be the appropriate feelings. And this is very common. I've also read an essay about it somewhere on the web. You're not feeling the way you're supposed to.
Yeah. And, like they said, the conflicting feelings, right? So all the things that you think you're not supposed to be feeling, when you said that, like relief and came out to me, because some people, especially if they've watched a loved one like suffer for so long, they feel part of the grief they sometimes feel is that relief that it's over, right?
Yeah.
Like the loved one isn't in pain anymore, and that they're also not in pain in the same way that they may have been like before the death. So people are like, why? I just lost like my partner in life that I love so much, and now I feel relief. And then you judge yourself for that, right? So
that was next on my list.
That's right. I stole your show.
The guilt about the relief, because after a 2-year struggle and the financial problems and watching them struggle and you're struggling, it's like there is really a relief. And I think everyone feels that who's been in that situation, but there's a kind of a shame to admit it, because like, I shouldn't be feeling this, We're humans, we're not saints. So just in general, the guilt and shame about the incorrect emotions, that was really the thing I struggled with most. And then, unfortunately, I had my grief counselor keep assuring me it's okay.
And that's what I keep thinking when you're talking. I think that's one of the most powerful things about having somebody trained in grief, and grief healing and recovery, is that they're that person that gives you that permission to feel everything, right? And to let you know that these emotions that are bringing you shame and bringing you judgment on yourself, like that's all normal, right? So to just
Yeah.
It's like a weight that's off of your heart that it just allows
Yeah.
to be with everything that's there, right? Yeah, it's so key.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So and so that would actually lead to me to give me self-doubt about my own love. You know, like, I really love this person if I'm having all these horrible feelings. So the next thing that comes is sort of the loss of identity, because we define ourselves with our roles and our relationships. And when we lose that, it's like, well, who are we? You know, especially if you're retired, you don't have your job. That, you know, a lot of people identify with their jobs and stuff. I'm retired. It's like, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
I was so identified as half of this relationship. Is like, who am I now?
Yeah. Your identity and purpose kind of in life, right? As Dery's partner and she as your partner. And
yeah. And then why am I here? You know, like, and what's life about? You know, what's left? So it's really sort of like an existential despair. I went through a period, I think, of about 2 months where that was very strong in me. It's like I just wanted to give up. It's like, why? And start all over again. I was like, oh no, you know, and it's complete existential despair, loss of identity, loss of purpose. Let's see what else I got here. Yeah, feeling the whole uncertainty about the future, like what comes next. Can I create a new life? I'm 74, so a lot of people at 74 are shutting down, even if they're in a relationship. And here I am faced with like creating a whole new life. And that can be rather daunting.
Yeah, so much. I'm just like, I can imagine, because I'm just going to speak from because I'm hearing my experience in your words so much too. Like even just after a divorce, right? You're just like, well, what? I have to like start again? I didn't think I'd ever have to date again. And all like, and what what does life look like now? Of course, like it's very unique to be older and look at that. But yeah, I hear so much of my own experience just in your sharing too, Jim. So.
Let's see. Oh yeah, and then lots of friends. You know, in my case, I moved here to Costa Rica and I married Dery, and so I didn't have a lot of my own friends. So her friends became my friends. And after her death, I'm still in touch with these people, but they weren't really my friends. And so it's like I've lost my major friendship network here. So they really have to start from scratch. I mean, if I reached out to them, they'd be there, but it's just, and I want to stay in touch with them, but they weren't my friends, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, but they aren't, you know.
It changes that dynamic.
Yeah, it changes the dynamic. So you may have lost your friends.
Yeah.
And then the question, can I make new friends, you know? And yeah, how do I do it?
Yeah.
I was
in a strange like country where you like kind of had friends with or gained friends and knew Dery's friends. Yeah. You're like, what? Now I have to figure out how to find friends in a new country too.
Yeah. And I've always been kind of an introvert. I was never very good at making friends. So all of that, and then just the fear I'll never find another partner. I'll never find someone, you know, like Dery was. We did, even with our difficulties, we had a real soul connection, you know. There's a lot of love there, and you think, I'll never find that again in another person. So there's all this doubt and the feelings of, so you hit that existential despair. Why bother? Loss of passion for life, feeling of helplessness. So my advice is sort of my bottom line lessons in that. Oh, and then I also found myself grieving. I just discovered this a few weeks ago. I had this, it's been over a year now since Dery passed away. And I just had this pervasive sadness. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then I finally realized what it was because I turned off the YouTube and sat with my feelings for a change.
That's key.
That I was grieving the fact that I was never able to make the relationship the way into the way I dreamed it should be. When I had, and I think relationships never turn out the way you dream them. But, I had a real strong, because my parents had a very cold relationship. When I was a kid, I said, I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to have a wonderful, loving relationship. And when you don't make that perfect relationship, you feel kind of like a failure. So what I was grieving was this feeling of failure because I couldn't make it work the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked and it was wonderful in a lot of ways, but it wasn't perfect. And
yeah,
you want that perfect relationship, which is probably an illusion. But until I identified that, identifying it really helped, because that's for the year that I was feeling the sadness. Is why am I so sad?
Yeah.
And grieving the loss of my dreams, of being able to make my dreams come true. So
I love that you just said that, Jim, because that's a key. That's, again, like I was saying, like the loss of connection tends to be like a frequent loss that we feel. That loss of hopes and dreams and expectations and ideas we have for things.
Yeah.
That's another that's a kicker in everyday life, whether you're talking about
Yeah.
relationships or you're seeing something that you want to create or something that you want to do at
Yeah.
work or in your life that doesn't work out. That all falls under that loss of dreams, expectations. Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it is.
So my 3 takeaway lessons: if your desperation to fill that void makes you vulnerable to rash and unwise decisions. Don't make any decisions for romantic decisions or even big financial decisions for at least a year. And find a good counselor, or at least a friend with some experience in grief. But I guess I'd also like to talk about, that's the grief part. I'd like to talk about the reconstruction part.
Yeah.
Because that's been a major part of my journey now. Because I mentioned before when we were talking to you, the Chinese symbol for crisis is the same as the symbol for opportunity. They're one and the same. And this grief, this loss, has been a chance for me to really reinvent myself at a new level. Because I realized, I could either sit down in my rocking chair and just rot away the rest of my life, or I needed to go out and make a new life. And the big issue I had to address was how to make friends, because I've never been good at that. And I've learned a secret. It's very simple. It's like, open your mouth.
Love it. Tell us more, Jim, with your mouth.
I started hiking, doing some organized hikes, and I just started talking to people. Meet someone, say, you want to go have coffee after the hike, or just, and it's for someone who's always been afraid to start conversations and wait them come to me, it's sort of been blowing my mind in some sense how easy it is, and that people respond. People respond. And I'm developing, I have several different little circles I've developed, all just from opening my mouth and putting myself out there. It's really, all I can say is you reach out, and I still don't know how to start a conversation. I dig around and find something. But when I started hiking, I just told people, I lost my wife, and I need to realize I need to create a new life and make new friends. So here I am. And people were open to that. And people were receptive to that, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's like such a authentic, like courageous way to
Yeah.
just be like, hey, this is the reality of my life and this is what I'm doing.
yeah,
As just
yeah,
a way to connect with people. That's so bold and brave.
yeah. So it's been it's been well, it's put me in a real state of gratitude to realize that people are out there and they're open to friendship, and they're just waiting, like you were sitting around waiting. They were waiting for someone to talk to them, you know, and they're there, and they you know, they're happy to make friends. It's not, it's you know, some of these friends will fade away and others will develop and new ones will come in, and I'm trusting that eventually, if you put yourself out there enough, you might find that one special relationship you're looking for. But even if you don't, at least now you've got friends, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, friends are good too.
Yeah.
So I wanted to read something I wrote this last Christmas.
Yeah, totally. And then I had a few questions that popped into my head too, Jim,
Oh, okay.
that I'd love to ask you.
Okay. You want to do those first?
Yeah, maybe. I think the key, there's so, I just, first of all, I want your story was so rich, and I loved hearing it. I know I've heard bits and parts of it before, but it was lovely to hear like it as a whole, and for you to so like, what's the word, eloquently and completely like outline like so many parts of grief, right? And this was like the key reason for being here and having this chat with you today, is to just outline like the grief that goes on before you lose a person, the grief that goes on after, you know, the added things that we do to ourselves to increase the suffering. Like this is all, it's such rich information for people to know. So thank you so much, Jim. But yeah, when you were chatting, I was thinking, because I remember thinking this in myself and my journey too, was that there's like surprises sometimes. Like I was surprised when something happened or I felt something. So was there like something that was kind of unexpected or surprising for you, kind of like in your experience that you can share?
Learning that I can go out there and make friends.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was like the opening the mouth and magic.
Yeah, open my mouth, that I can open my mouth and make friends. And that's a huge surprise for me.
Yeah. And how like huge part of healing that is for you, right? Because again,
Yeah.
the power of human connection is everything. That's
Yeah.
what we're all here, right? So
Yeah.
Awesome. Another thing that I think is key for the grief, like our grief experience is, and for highlighting, is like what's helpful and what's not helpful. Like what's a helpful way to support somebody that's grieving. So I don't know, maybe you can speak from your experience personally, Jim, like what was the most helpful kind of support that you received from somebody?
Well, the most helpful was like from my counselor. And then Dery and I have one good friend that sort of come in and go out of our life. She was here when Dery was sick to help me. She specializes in helping people with dementia. And afterwards, she helped me clean out. And we have this huge house and it's full of junk, and I got to get rid of most of it. I paid her and she did it. I didn't have to deal with it. It's like more than half the stuff in the house is gone now, and I didn't have to lift a finger. And it was really helpful to help people with the practical stuff, you know, especially like right after the death. You're expected to dispose, in Costa Rica, you're expected to dispose of the body the same day. And you got to deal with the morgue, and you got to pay the doctors, and there's all this legal stuff you got to do, and you just lost your loved one, and there's all this crap you want to do, and doctors want to be paid. It's like, you know, come on, guys, you know, give me a break. To have someone that can help you with that stuff is enormous, and this one woman was able to help me with a lot of that stuff. And then my counselor, and then a few friends. I have to say here, social media and technology gets a lot of bad rap, but it has literally saved my life through all this, because so many of my support was coming through WhatsApp and Zoom meetings. I was meeting with a woman that Dery and I knew that teaches Andean spirituality, and she had a course she was teaching, and the students, we met on Zoom, and the students came around the world, and they were very supportive of me. I met you on social media. I see my counselor is in California, as a family friend from California, so I met with her on WhatsApp. And some of my new friends, the reason I'd meet them on a hike or something, the reason I was able to develop more of a friendship is WhatsApp. We chat on WhatsApp. If it wasn't for WhatsApp, I might never see them again or something, you know. For me, especially during COVID, but I think anyway, social media has been a huge help for me in staying connected with people. I'm really grateful for our modern technology. It's made my life so much easier, because when you come home at night, oh, there's one of your friends and leaving you a WhatsApp message or something. It might just be a little message, but you feel connected. And like you said, connection is an important thing. And with things like WhatsApp, it's so much easier to stay connected. And it saved my life.
Yeah.
I think I'm really grateful for WhatsApp and Facebook and Zoom. And I still meet with some people from around the world on Zoom every 2 weeks, and you know, they're friends. So that's been helpful. I think one of your questions you wanted to ask was if I got any unhelpful advice, and I really,
Yeah, it's like that other end of the thing.
Yeah.
What was like the least helpful for you? Because that's
I didn't have anyone like that. Surprisingly, I didn't. Maybe because I wasn't, you know, crying on someone's shoulder all the time, but I never had anyone say get out of it, or, you know, snap out of it or anything like that. It's like everyone I've dealt with has been neutral or supportive. You know? So
awesome. That's so great, Jim. That's good, because I mean, that's that's like the huge part, if not the sole inspiration behind this for me, is in awareness and education of the things. Sometimes the way we respond to people that are grieving can be actually really unhelpful, and can like cause them to kind of isolate and not courageously share how they're feeling and their experiences. So that's so amazing to hear that you didn't have that. So
yeah, I feel grateful about that. I've only had good support. Yeah.
and I love that you brought up like the technology gift and the social media gift of all of this. What popped into my head was kind of like even the timing of when Dery passed, like in 2020, like during the pandemic, and just all these online avenues of connecting and stuff were just amped right up, right? So even just the timing of that, I think, was like a gift, right? Because that's readily available for you at the time, the exact time that you needed it. So yeah, awesome, yay. I'm trying to think. I think we'll pop into, because you said you wanted to share something before I asked you those few questions. Something you wanted to share.
This is something I wrote on. This is sort of like, this is what my life is about, I guess, right now. I wrote this on Christmas Eve or Christmas. There's an empty and blessed Christmas, I called it. No spouse, no family, no tree, no lights, no presents, nothing to do. Sounds dreadful, but it wasn't. What I felt this Christmas Eve was a sense of blessedness, a sacred emptiness, a sacred silence. I felt blessed because I knew I had friends who cared and had some exchanges on WhatsApp. I found I could reach out and make new friends. Finding that I could make new friends is huge. All I have to do is be vulnerable and courageous enough to try. This was a huge step for me. After being cloistered in my marriage for 18 years, my fear was I would be alone and isolated. Now that I know I don't have to. And I noticed that when I recognized and stopped my fantasies, I felt a subtle panic, an existential dread. Why bother with anything became the question. The aloneness and the silence gave me a chance to feel that fear and also see my blessings. I realized this emptiness and stillness is exactly what I needed. I feel like a caterpillar in his cocoon, transforming from the old into the new, complete metamorphosis of being, or like a seed in a pot. All I need is the water of self-love and the light of trust in the blessings from the unknowable. I felt that stillness and the trust and that self-love this Christmas Eve. I drew a rune. I got gateway reversed. It said, a quickening of your development is indicated here, but you will still have reason to halt along the way. You can reconsider the old, to integrate the new. So that was my Christmas. It really blew my mind that instead of feeling this emptiness, despair, it was just a blessed silence and quietness and peace that I hadn't known in quite a while. And last night when I was thinking about this interview, laying awake, trying to sleep about this I came up, I realized my symbol for the next year is the phoenix. You know, rebirth, total rebirth out of the flames. And my mission statement was to bring joy to other beings by being in my own joy and my own gratitude. And my motto is open my mouth.
Share that joy through your mouth.
So I would just like to encourage people who might be going through grief, is like to not give up. Do feel your feelings. Don't feel bad about whatever they are, but also reconsider that this is an opportunity to create a new life. And when you're ready, dive in there and do it. And it's maybe on one hand, it's a lot of work and hard. On the other hand, it's easier than you think. Kind of a paradox, you know. I keep thinking, this is a lot of work. And I'm just always putting myself out there, you know, it's a lot of work. But it's actually not that much. The main work is just overcoming my habitual patterns, you know. I mean, that's the real work, I guess, for any of us, is to overcome our habitual patterns.
Yeah. So
I encourage people to have hope and dive in there. dive back into life. It's worth it.
I'm feeling so emotional, like so moved right now. I'm kind of speechless, Jim, and that doesn't happen very often. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And there's so much wisdom that you've gained from this experience. And when you're talking about some of the transformation and some of the things that you've experienced it and learned about yourself from this experience, I mean, that's like the gifts that come out of this, right?
Yeah.
And that mirrors my experience, right? Like you said, like when something dies, whether it's something in you that dies or something in your life that dies, right? It's not to see that it's not like the end of the world. It feels like that. And that's okay if you feel like that for however long that you need to feel that. But there's always some hidden gifts underneath and hidden transformation that you learn stuff about your life and yourself that you didn't even know was there or possible. And that's like,
exactly. Yeah.
It's life altering, right?
And I feel like I'm discovering a whole new personality in me that I didn't know I had.
A whole new Jim.
Yeah, a whole new Jim. At 74 years old, I'm discovering a whole new Jim. So,
how exciting.
You're never too old.
Jim with a pogo stick, jump over potholes and speak joy out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Thank you, Jim. Like, I know we've been talking about it for a while and I've been visualizing it for a while, and it's just, the experience has been more rich and more just amazing than I envisioned. So when we talk about hopes and dreams and expectations, this was like surpassed what I had in mind. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful to hear more about your story. I'm so grateful that you were able to have the courage to use your mouth to speak and inspire other people. It's priceless. It's priceless. I barely know where to go after this, but any wisdom? I'm trying to think You said everything that I would say to everybody. So again, I guess let's just reiterate, not even reiterate, but just reemphasize the absolute power that I've found from the journey that I've been on is to literally just be with absolutely every feeling that you experience and feel. And I got in the habit of, when I stood back and was like, oh, I'm feeling an emotion that feels uncomfortable, like I'm feeling sad or angry or afraid or lonely or whatever, I found and now trained my brain or my heart, wherever it's coming from, to be like, am I experiencing a loss? Could this be grief? And that's like, it's just an automatic like self-love behavior, right? Because it lets you like sit back, because instead you just sit there and you kind of judge yourself, like, why am I feeling this? My life is fabulous. I have this, and my life compared to somebody else's, right? But if you sit back and just be with your feelings and be like that nurturing parent we all need, right? And
Yeah.
some of us
Yeah.
didn't have that when we were younger. So you learn how to be that for yourself when you hold your emotions like that. And it's priceless, because that's all you need. Like, those emotions just need to be accepted and allowed, and then they just naturally flow through you, right? It's a natural process of the grief and the healing.
You said something about loving yourself. And I'm taking this course by Matt Kahn, who wrote the book Whatever Arises, Love That, and he points out, when you find those things about yourself you're upset or whatever and you don't like, you need more love, not less.
Yeah.
We don't need to judge ourselves and castigate ourselves. We need to give ourselves more love.
Yeah. Yeah. Those emotions that are the hardest to love are the ones that need the most love from us.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, awesome. Well, I think I would like to end with a quote that's really, really powerful for me, from a very powerful lady, Brene Brown. Every time I read this quote, I tear up, because it really highlights the passion and inspiration that I have for this series and for this path that I want to do moving forward, for having conversations like this that will help heal and inspire other people. So again, that healing power of human connection. So this quote: not enough of us know how to sit in pain with others. Worse, our discomfort shows up in ways that can hurt people and reinforce their own isolation. I've started to believe that crying with strangers in person could save the world. Every time. I've read that like hundreds, probably, well, maybe like close to 100 times. And it's why we're doing this. So that's perfect way to end, I feel. Thank you so much, Jim. It was lovely. It was so lovely. Thank you, everybody. I hope you learned a lot. I hope your heart was expanded and inspired. And I hope you're inspired to be courageous like Jim and open your mouth and share your experience and share your pain and share yourself and your light with people, because it changes the world and it changes everything. So see you guys next time. Bye.